several for weddings. But anyway, Merritt Island Press, it's 2008.
That's a long time to wait,
Yeah.
you know, for it to rise.
Well, we should have been
Really? And yes, that's called that's actually called the holiday. So that's given, we'll talk about that tomorrow. That traditionally
They smell like a home, rather than smell like socks.
but now most people, because they don't give it, not the priests, yeah, it's like the rabbis and stuff like that. Nobody does that today, so she talked about it in there. And I think she talked about a friend of hers freezes it
My hair was
like once a year, mixes it all together and bakes it.
look like Einstein. Like Einstein.
Sometimes I do it. It was funny, my mom used to share without steering.
Thank you.
That is actually
Good.
Well,
Thank you.
you know, when people don't have their stuff in it, maybe they should get it.
You did it well. You did your I have the face. I have the face. Well, you can't be diverse. Tell us.
Why did she miss it?
One time I felt
Cadbury?
the first time well, they are the dogs I thought. I don't think that's the same. Well, and my last show before I quit.
Yep. All right, y'all, let's begin. A couple of just accounting things for us I want to make sure we're aware of. We'll start with two things for the church and then one thing for this group in particular. Those who were not here Sunday or those who were and didn't get them, I remind you that we're doing Easter flower donations right now, and so you need one. So yeah, if you need these, this is the envelope. You can fill it out, all of those things, and put it into the offering plate. I told you all last week that if you have hearing aids and you're having a hard time hearing on Sunday or hearing what we're doing on Wednesday nights, and you want to tie your hearing aids into our sound system so that you can hear better, we figured out a way to make that happen. We have step-by-step instructions for you. It looks like this. So if you need one of these, let me know and we'll make sure you get this. And that way you can hear a little bit better. The thing for this group in particular, we are done next week. The Wednesday after that, so the Wednesday of Holy Week, we are going to do a virtual bake with the author, with Beth. And then a time of question and answering. So that's going to happen the Wednesday of Holy Week. So we will not finish next week, we'll finish the week after. That's going to take place at 6 o'clock, not 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock, not 7 o'clock. It is virtual, so in your kitchens, around a computer. We'll do it via Zoom. You'll get a chance to walk through the process with her, and then it's a time for just conversation. For her to talk with us. She's been listening every week. I think it's either this week or next that she's on vacation and won't be. But she's been listening every week, so it's a chance for us to talk with her and for her to talk again with us. So the Wednesday of Holy Week, 6 p.m., not 7. Questions about that? Okay. As you look around, if you see someone who's not here, make sure you let them know. Pam?
Is it okay to share it with people that aren't part of our church too?
Absolutely not. It is just us. We are not going to let anyone else. Yeah, so I think so. I don't see any reason not to. I think it's a cool experience. We obviously will have a different experience with it, But I think there's no reason not to include folks if you want to include folks. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have to send out the link to all of the congregation, and not all of the congregation has participated. So some people may choose to be on or not.
Do you want me to put it in the DVR?
You could. Yeah, I mean, you could. It's fine. So, any other questions about that? So I'm excited. Again, I've done this before. It's really cool. What I haven't done before is the kind of conversation part as well. So I'm excited about that. So if you have questions, if you have comments for her, now that you've read the book, it'll be interesting to see the comments that she has for us or the questions that she has for us. So I'm excited to walk through that with y'all.
Chris, and maybe we'll go to that next week, but will there be certain things like we've already done before we got on the Zoom with her, like mixing the water and the yeast?
Phenomenal question. So will there be things that you should have already done? Not necessarily. It's entirely up to you. So she will walk us through step by step, getting us to where it is time to warm the bread for it to rise. She will most likely, if she does what she's done in the past, she will have already taken a batch to that stage, and then she will show us how she braids and things of that nature. So if you want to experience it with her in real time, then just have the elements. If you want to sit, sorry, I didn't know if that was her texting me, correcting me. If you want to just sit and watch, and I've done it both ways, and it's been really cool both ways, and just see and then see how other people do it. So that's entirely up to you. But you really don't need to do anything, just be present. But if you want to participate, I mean, there's something, in my mind, there's something really cool about having a communal bake and baking with the author. So I think that's really neat. So, but great question. You don't have to do anything. But I would recommend, at the very least, being prepared to bake, because there really is something cool about walking through that. Rebecca, what I said is on the Wednesday of Holy Week, we're going to do a communal virtual bake with the author. So 6 o'clock. So again, be mindful of that time. 6 o'clock, not 7 o'clock. And the reason is that allows you to go ahead and bake the bread that night if you want to and experience it. So, make sense? Okay. Any questions about that? Any business we need to deal to before we look at the text that we're reading today? So, who baked this week? How was it? What was it like? Did you dig it? Are you getting better at it? So, Debbie, say more. You're nodding.
Well, the first week was the pretzel disaster. It looked like a pretzel. Never rose, and I figured it out when I did it the next time that the water was too hot for the yeast. So when it didn't bubble and stuff, I just threw it out and did it again with more like lukewarm water. They came out great. That was like, did it, you know.
Well, there's a feeling of accomplishment, right? Especially having not had it go the way you wanted it to go the first time, and then seeing a glitch again. And there's something cool about looking at it and going, okay, this isn't right. And she kind of talks about it in her experience as she's doing it and doing it and doing it. There's times where she's looking at it and going, okay, the bread feels different, or the kneading is different. Sometimes it's because different ingredients. Sometimes it's just a her thing and how she's experiencing it. And so, yeah, it's the being adaptive, and it's just a different process. Pam, I know, made round challah this week. Sent me a picture. And I'm not getting as many pictures as I was, so I hope you are still baking, but very pretty. Talk a little bit about that process.
Well, actually, my whole baking process was almost spiritualist.
So what was the difference? Yeah, what made it more spiritual? Because that was my next question.
Well, it's not going to sound as not pretty as it should, but I think it's because my dough was better. For the first time, it wasn't a sticky mess, and I wasn't annoyed and trying to figure it out. and it felt like it was actually right, and so I felt really more into it and really more present when I was playing with it.
So I don't know if y'all have had a similar experience. The first couple of times, and when I did the first virtual bake with her, I was really frustrated because I was following the recipe as she said it, and it was like I was working with cement because the dough was so sticky and I couldn't do anything with it, and I had it all over my hands, I had it all over my spoon, and I'm like, okay, this is miserable. I'm not going to finish doing this. And so one of my, at that point, because there were so many people on the Zoom, you couldn't talk, but you could type in questions in the chat. And so one of my questions is, okay, everything is too sticky, this is not fun, what's the solution? And her response was, oh, just add more flour. And then she went on to the next question. And it was like, on the one hand, it felt dismissive. And on the other hand, it was like, son of a gun, it's that easy. And I'm probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks into it, right? So I'm frustrated. I'm about ready to quit. But I don't want to quit because that means I failed. And I can't, my personality is such that I can't do that. And when it was, oh, just add more flour, it was like, oh, you idiot, of course, right? But I didn't know. And so doing that made the process different. So almost spiritual. What's the step to make it sure enough spiritual? What's the missing ingredients in the process for you right now?
That's a good question.
Okay. Think about that, because it'd be really interesting if between now and next time you kind of go, okay, this was it, right? Maybe this is the thing that changed it for you. Because once it gets to that, at least for me, it takes on a different thing. But doing the round, talk about that, because it's a pretty loaf.
It's not right. I didn't get those nice bubbles in the middle. I got that part was because my dough was nice. I mean, I could easily roll it this time, so I could get it set up, but the crisscrossing thing, I messed up, and I didn't feel like going back and figuring out what I was supposed to have done, so I just started tucking.
Okay. So you can't really tell in the picture, so thanks for sharing that. How did you, because clearly Carl didn't know, so how did you figure out how to get it in the round and do that? Okay. So YouTube, right? I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about this process, at least for me, and I hope for y'all as well, is because this is not something that I knew intuitively how to do. And it's not something I necessarily could figure out how to do. And so there's a humility in that process to say, I want to do this, be it a round loaf or be it a braid or something else, and then to actually go find out how to do that. And there's a great deal of trust because you don't know these YouTube people. So it could be someone, I mean, let's be honest, right? People have plenty of time. And so it could be someone who's putting on one of those videos is going, how many idiots are going to follow this one, right? And what they're doing each week is checking their metrics to see, okay, who watched all the way through? So there is a great deal of trust. And I don't know how y'all have found, but most of the time, at least for me, when I've gone to YouTube, the trust has been rewarded. Just like this, right? And so the beautiful thing about that is, there is so much brokenness, and yet at the same time, there's so much good in our nature. That what people are putting out there, not all of them, but they're putting out there these sure enough guides to help you through this process. Either because they have struggled before and they don't want you to struggle, or because they are so proud of what they have done that they realize, hey, this might make the road easier or the path easier for the next person. And I don't know if y'all think about it that way, but there is something beautiful in that. So, what about anyone else? Anyone else bake this week? How was the process? What was it like? How did it go? He's not talking about his process. Yeah, so we have two different kinds of experiences, right? So we have the pretzel to the, hey, it's looking good, it's looking like I want to the, man, check it out. I can make challah to, how did I do it the first time? Because it's been broken the times after that. And the question becomes, what was different in the process? And maybe it's, my water mix is too hot, I burned the yeast, or maybe I haven't added something the right way, or maybe sometimes it's just things don't work and you got to try again.
Well, if you listen to the people from New York about the bagels, it's the water down here. Doesn't work.
The water down here doesn't work?
You can't make good bagels down here because of the water. Yeah.
Well, but there's some truth in that too. And Beth talks about it in her book. Different places have different things. So when I go visit my mom, and she and I did it once at her house, their water in northern Florida, 2 hours from here is sulfury. And so when we were making it, I was like, oh, this is terrible. It doesn't taste right. It doesn't feel right. And because it was different water. So it's funny. My mom and I made this week, and I told you I still don't have a hollow bowl because mine broke. And so we used a different bowl that we had. And this bowl is wider rather than taller. And so instead of the dough rising, it kind of spreads out. And so when you look at it, you go, okay, it didn't rise. But then you realize all it's really done is just filled the shape of the bowl. So it's risen, but it's more widened than it's risen. And so it doesn't look right. So we made it, but I'm not happy with my bowl. So I'm efforting a bowl still. So anyone else? Other experience this week?
I wanted to ask you a question.
Go.
You talked about when you added ingredients like the apples and things. Did you say after you divided it into the thirds?
So the question is, like when I make every week and I add white chocolate chips, because that's what Clay wants, right? So you get the rise. So you've made it, you put it in a bowl, you've let it rise. Then you divide it in half for your 2 loaves. And you take the 1/2 and divide it into thirds if you're making just a regular. So at that point, once I've divided it into thirds, I flatten them out. Then I put in the additives, and then I roll it.
Then you just fold it.
Correct. That's how I do it. And it's worked for me. Say that one more time.
She said you can explain it.
Well, I communicate for a living, but often I suck at it, right? So I'm reminded of that all the time. Usually it's people who are much, meaner who say that to me. I wasn't expecting that from you today, but I'll cry a little bit. I expect something like that from Judy George, though. Come on. Anyone else? Other experiences as you were baking?
I have a problem with my braids at the end. Because I'm pulling it wrong or something, one's got a lot more bread, so I'm always ending up with a bump at the end of my bread.
Well, and so that could be frustrating because it doesn't look like the way you want it to look.
That's right.
And so one of the things that's cool about the bake is what you will see is everyone goes through the process differently. What you'll also see is kind of how she does it. And when she gets through at the end, she kind of tucks everything under that helps smooth out the braid. And it kind of makes the whole end product a little more even, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
I personally don't care. And so like if I showed you a picture of my loaves, they never look the same. They're always kind of one's bigger, one's more lopsided, whatever. And I'm not going for pretty. I'm just going for.
I guess when she tucks it, she must mash it or something, because when I tucked mine under, it came out.
Correct. Yeah, she will
Straight loose.
she will pinch them together and then roll them under, because you're right. If you don't, one of 2 things will happen. Either they will come out or they'll break apart. And so then you have tails. And that looks weird too. So, Rebecca.
On one of the videos, when the person got to the end of the braid, she just put the 3, kind of pinched them together and then rolled them like, sideways just rolled them and then tucked them under. And I guess the bread is very elastic and will do that. But she did it so quickly and expertly. I just pinched them.
So I'm glad you kind of put that little caveat at the end, because the way you phrased it was, I guess that the bread is elastic, because I don't know, because I haven't baked yet.
No, I did.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just
But I was
messing
not
with you.
confident about like pulling something, to stick out from my beautiful braid and then rolling it. It just seemed like it was a very destructive way to end the braiding process, but the woman on the video was very good at it.
And so hold on to that word destructive, because we're going to talk about not that word, but a similar image a little bit later. And it's interesting as you go through the process to be thinking about the images that are forming in your mind as you're walking through the steps, right? And as you read the instructions, what are the words that stick out at you? What are the words that you hear? What are the feelings all of that creates? Any other things like that? Any other things to talk about this week?
It makes great French toast.
And she says that too, which is funny. And what's funny about that though is my dad growing up would cook breakfast on Saturday mornings, and he would make one of two things. He would make pancakes or French toast. He made the most god-awful French toast that is ever, they should not serve it in prisons. It was so bad. And so that's the French toast I had growing up. And so the first time Beth talked about making French toast, my thought was, why would you ruin good bread? At the very least, just eat it. It's good carbs. Why would you ruin that with, that's something you're supposed to use with just crappy Wonder white bread, right? But then Becky made it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so different than the nasty stuff my dad made growing up. And so when he would make French toast, I'd be like, oh, for the love of God, can you please just stick with pancakes? Because it didn't screw up the pancakes, but the French toast was so bad. She talks about kneading the dough. That's where we start this week. How do you know, she says, the dough is ready to knead? How do you know the dough is ready to knead? And then she follows that up. How do you know anything? How do you know? Okay.
Reading the directions.
You read the directions, but even when you read directions, regardless of what they are, it's a little vague, right?
I think it's a feel of bread, that you're not having to throw flour on it.
Okay, wait. Listen to the question, though. How do you know anything? How is it that you gain knowledge? Practice, okay. Experience. Well, that's different than practice, potentially, right? How do you gain knowledge? Watch somebody else. Okay, so you go to YouTube and you see how other people do it. And so it starts with curiosity, right? It starts with, I have this thing I want to do, I want to acquire, I want to solve. And then if I want it bad enough, I'm going to go find it out. But I think in our core, we have a way that each of us claims knowledge. So here's my story. 2 churches ago, we're living in Georgia in a small town, and we're living, which sounds just stupid to say it out loud, but we're living in the suburbs of a small town. Our community was built on big, huge open farmland. So what they did is they kind of, tore the ground apart, built up homes, roads, all of those things. Well, it was a field. And so at some point, there were mice, there were rats, there were wherever in the field. And so they needed to find a place to stay. In the winter, they figured out garages were warm. And so they would go into the garages. So all of us had, the little glue traps on the side of our garages going up the walls. Everyone did. It is what it is. In the spring, I'm going out to feed the dogs, and on one of those glue traps is a snake. I am clear it's a copperhead because they looked like all the copperheads I had seen before. So my knowledge came from past experience. Becky, I go in and say, hey, there's a copperhead on one of the traps in the garage. Becky goes out, looks at it, she goes immediately to Google. That's the engineering mind. She's going to the experts. Clay goes out, looks at it, and he goes immediately to one of his books because he's got a book on snakes. And he brings the book out and he goes through it, right? Each of us has something, I think, that is kind of the expert in our lives. And that tends to be the first place we go to acquire knowledge. How do you know anything? Think about it for yourselves. How is it that you know what you know? And for me, I am experience. I got to do it again and again and again. You can tell me, you can walk me through step by step like I'm 3 years old. It will not matter until I have done it myself. I have to have experience in order to acquire. Think about how it is for you. How is it that you know?
Well, not that way. I was thinking that's more of a male perspective.
Certainly, it could be.
For me, if somebody else has done it and something bad happened, I don't have to give it a shot to see if I can do it better. I used to tell my son that, and I said, you know, some people don't get by with much, and you're one of those people. So rather than think how I'm going to do it differently this time, instead of realizing like maybe I shouldn't do that at all, but I don't know, I think that kind of tends to be a male perspective.
Could be. Could be. But think about how it is that you acquire knowledge. My guess is that most of the time we don't think about it. It's just part of who we are and part of what we do, right? I mean, so how do you know the dough is ready to knead? Well, for those who get it from the expert, you follow the directions. She called her friend. I mean, that's the version of Google. Is it a copperhead? Well, I don't know. Let me go to Google and see what Google says. Is it time for me to knead? Well, let me call my friend who got me into this freaking mess in the first place. I mean, that's what she says she says it a little more graciously, but that's what she says in the book, right? I mean, so for Debbie, the first process is I got a pretzel. Well, I had the same thing. And it was about the fifth time where I go, okay, now I'm making challah. But I watched the bake, I talked to my Jewish friends, but I had to go through those things first, and maybe it's because I'm a guy, a little sexism tonight, or maybe it's just that's how I acquire it. So think about, again, because I think this is really important, because I don't think we think about the ways we do it, we just do it. It's part of who we are. What that also means is we probably don't think about the way the people we are connected with acquire it either. And so my guess is whatever tensions that we have often with each other is because we're looking at them like they're idiots when they don't acquire knowledge the right way. Well, which is our way, right? I mean, well, right, you see what but because we don't understand and it seems so basic, but we each do it differently. And there's something beautiful about that even in the frustrations. Yeah? So, when you are kneading, and we've talked a little bit about that already, how's it going for you? How's the process? What do you do? How do you do it? You got the ball. What's your next step, Rebecca?
She talked about how she can tell from just getting to know a person, she can tell how they're going to knead the dough.
Yep.
And so I was kind of paying attention to just, what is natural to me. And I kind of am a quarter turn full. Quarter turn full. Does that make me left-brained and uncreative? I don't think so. But anyway, yeah.
So how else do you do it? What do you do, right? So quarter turn full. It's how she does it. It's what she says in the book. You'll see her do it. There's a loving kind of context about her. She'll hold it. She'll flip it. She'll turn it. I mean, it's almost caressing, right? I mean, there is something again, sexism. There's something almost motherly about it,
Love it.
or whatever.
You have to love baking and cooking to do it.
Yeah, but I don't know that I love it. I like the whole process. So it's interesting because I will push and I'll kind of spread it out, fold it, push. I mean, I want to for me, I want to feel like I'm touching all of it. I was watching my mom this week and she kind of just touches it, turns it, touches it again. I'm like, well, you're not even doing anything, right? I mean, you're just really spinning it in circles. I mean, you're like not even touching it hard enough to dent it. So I don't even know what you're doing. But it's, and sometimes I'll take it and just kind of, I don't throw it down, but drop it down and then push it again. I mean, so in some regard, what word did we have? Destructive? So there's almost a violence to it sometimes. And as I'm seeing that, I'm like, okay, well, what's going on now? What's happening within me that there's some violence happening in my kitchen? But I was also watching my mom going, well, you ain't doing anything. I mean, all you're doing is just spin it. I mean, how many times can we spin it before you figure out it's whatever shape you want it? But what's your process? How is it that you're doing it? Do you even have a process? Push it and fold, push it and fold.
And 3 or 4 songs on the radio.
Okay.
That's usually long enough.
Yeah, and so,
But you're making gluten when
Right.
you're doing this. You've got to get enough gluten formed in the dough for it to bake.
Yeah, you're developing the gluten.
So there's,
right, which is why I'm watching my mom going, you're doing it wrong. But then I'm like, well, she's really not. That's just the way she's doing it.
Did you tell her?
So I'm pretty confident I told her the first time we were doing it. But then it moved from, and I told y'all this before, at one point it moved from my thing and it's like, okay, how does this become our thing? Which was a strange thing for me. Because, I played sports growing up. She wouldn't watch. So we didn't really have our things together. And so it was a cool thing to have our thing. And so I can't lie, there was a part of me that goes, all right, you're screwing it up. You're doing it wrong. Not this time, but when we first started doing it. And then it clearly is not me, because y'all know me. I'm not this in touch with myself or spiritual. There was that God thing that said, okay, wait, this is something y'all are doing together. Just shut up and stop thinking what you're thinking and enjoy the process, right? So it's one of those times where my mouth actually didn't work quicker than my brain, and so it was a good thing for me. So, but it's interesting to watch. And if you aren't really aware of how you do it, be thinking about how you do it. Be intentional at one time and go, okay, why am I doing it this way? I think it's a cool thing. And you might not ever care after that, but just see what it's like one time.
so how do you know when it's time to stop the kneading?
Yeah. So how do you know when it's time to stop kneading? What's the answer? How do you know? For Paul, it's 3 or 4 songs, depending on how good the songs are. So, but no, I think this is a good question. How do you know when it's time?
I timed it.
Okay, so she said do it, what did she say, do it for 15 minutes? 10 minutes? So at 10 minutes, I'm done.
Seemed like forever.
10 minutes? 10 minutes is a long time, yes. But I think that's one of those things that you realize. 10 minutes in the grand scheme of things is nothing. 10 minutes in the moment, which is why she says over and over and over again, be present, right?
That's why you sing a song, you praise the Lord, listen to it, so 10 minutes is not quite as long that way.
Sure. Yeah, but that's the beautiful thing is whatever it takes to be present in the moment is going to be different for each of us, But one of the things that if you're present, you can't not come away with a sense of how long time is. 10 minutes while you're kneading bread is an eternity. And so for the first couple times I was like, holy God, I got to start working out again. Because my arms are jelly going for 10 minutes at this rate, right? It's work. So again, we haven't answered the question, how do you know when you're done kneading?
When
When my arms get tired, sure enough, right? When I can't do it anymore, how do you know?
It's like you buy a KitchenAid mixer and like the dough hook.
Okay, when the dough hook is done enough, how do you know?
It just feels.
Ooh, bread is alive. Say more about that. That's a great image.
Bread is alive, and so you knead it tenderly or roughly, whichever you want to do, but then it gets to a point when you know it's done. You put it in the bowl.
Yeah, so the answer is you kind of just know. You get to a point, which doesn't answer your question. It's not very fulfilling, right?
Well, I mean, I guess there's an intuition about
Okay.
it. You intuit.
Well, so it's like anything. The more you do something, you'll have a sense and you'll have a feel from when you know. But remember, this is a spirituality thing. And as we talked about, I think it was in week 2 when we were talking, her word, and I love this sentence, it's my favorite sentence in the book, I need for my needs, right? And so if we are present in the moment and feeling, because it's a tactile thing, this whole process is a tactile thing. If we're feeling it, I think there is something about us that we're just done. And today it might be 10 minutes. Next week it might be 6. I mean, we're just going to get a sense of feel and we're done. For me, it tends to be I'm done when it's not sticky anymore.
So can you over-knead?
Can you over-knead? Great question. Great question. I think the answer to that is yes. Which really screws with my worldview, because I'm clear if some is good, more is better. So, if you need some, the more you need is better. But it's like anything else. I think you can overdo it.
What's like when you make pie crust, if you mess up too many times, your pie crust is really tough.
Or you just go to Publix and buy the frozen one and then you're good. And you don't have to worry about that anymore, right? But I think in the process is, when do you know you're done? I think you're done. And you finished, right? I mean, when you can walk away and say, I gave this moment my all, whatever that is. So, but that is a great question. And again, if we're present, and this is a spirituality thing, not a legalistic thing, I think there is something within us that will tell us we're done. So, she talks about in rising up, it's time for the dough to kind of grow from this ball to this thing. Has anyone put it outside to rise? How are y'all rising your dough? And is it working?
The first time we did, the second time.
Second time, not so much. Okay.
The first time I baked outside was that Saturday when it rained so hard all day and everything was damp when it. So I heated up my toaster oven and then turned it off and set the bowl up on top of it.
Okay. So she put hers on top of a heated toaster oven. Beth will talk about in here that she does it or friends do it. They'll run the dishwasher and they'll put it on the counter on top of the dishwasher. I have a friend, I don't remember what he did, but he did something strange, and it was like, I don't know how that works, but again, it was invection kind of thing. I've done it outside. I typically will put mine in the oven, turn the oven on for 200. When I'm ready to put it in, I'll turn the oven off and put it in and just let it rise. I've done a combination of outside and in the oven, but I haven't really done just outside. There was one time, the first time my mom and I baked, well, maybe the third time we baked together. We did after she had watched a virtual bake and she had participated in a virtual bake, and so we got everything ready, and we were at a different place that did not have an oven. And so I was like, okay, I don't know what we're going to do now. We're just going to throw it away. But that didn't seem very satisfying. And at the end of it, Beth said, well, you could always just put it, and not to me, someone had asked this question, you could always just put it in the refrigerator and let it sit overnight. And it was just like revolutionary. I was like, wait, what, that works? And so sure enough, we put it in the refrigerator overnight, and it rose more than any other bowl I think I had ever had rise. And so I was so excited, and it was so cool. I tried it here, and it didn't work. And so I went through the process, tried it here, it didn't work. So, she and I are emailing, whatever. And I was like, okay, what's up? She goes, I don't know, try it again. So I tried it again the next week. It didn't work. And she just goes, well, I guess it's Florida. So, know that's an option for y'all to try. I'm going to try it again. But I'm only 1 for 3, so my odds are not good. But I want to see, it was just a cool thing. And part of it is fun because it's just a different way to do the process.
Well, did she ever address, like, if it rises too much?
If it rises too much, great question. Can anything rise too much? No. These are carbs. It's bread. How could you possibly have too much bread?
Well, no, I used to, in the summertime when my kids would be outside or, get busy, I'd just flop it back in and let it rise again until I had time to do something with it.
Yeah, so can it rise too much? Well, I think the answer to that is get a bigger bowl.
Oh, no, it was in a big bowl.
Right. You can always get a bigger bowl. But much like chocolate chip cookies, can you have too many chips in your cookies? No. Can the bread rise too much? Absolutely not if you're making bread. If you're putting raisins or something in it, well then yes. But if you're making just good bread, I've never had that. I've never had it. I have had it rise above my bowl when I first started, and so I just got a different bowl. Because I didn't want it wasn't a spiritual thing. I didn't want it going over the bowl and then having to clean the oven, right? This was a lazy thing for me. So, and so my response to that was, I'm just getting a bigger bowl. So that's my response.
My grandma always put warm water in the sink, and then she put a towel over it.
And let it rise that way. Yeah. And so I think that's cool is, there's different ways to do it. And so again, part of realizing that we're part of a community who's doing this, even if we're only going to do it for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, right? But again, there are people all over the world who are doing this every week. We are part of a community who's doing something. And so a really cool thing is to have conversation about how do you do it? And what's your process? And what are your steps? And then maybe, Sue, a great question is, can it rise too much? And you might find someone who says, absolutely it can rise too much. And here's what you need to do to stop it, right?
Some kind of dough gets, if you work with it too much, it gets tough.
Yep.
Or whatever, so I didn't, not experienced bread maker, so I was just a person.
I think that eventually it can
Living and learning.
But isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing, living and learning, right? What a great image. If what we take from this is we are living and learning, goodness gracious. Page 126, the question is, what do we need to do to rise up to be our best? So she's now taking the bread, it's the top of page 126. She's now taking the bread and it rising and drawing the parallel to life. And her question is, what do we need to do to rise up to be our best? What are those things that we need, you and I, to be our best? Sleep. Okay. Okay, to keep trying. to continue the process, to keep growing, perseverance. Okay? Well, but not always. I mean, it depends on what we're repeating, but right? I mean, what are the things that we need to be our best? Okay, experience. Okay, accepting ourselves, learning from our mistakes. What else? Rebecca.
Nurturing joy. Like we need to find what sparks joy in us and give ourselves time for that.
Yeah, so nurturing joy. And so, as she says from the beginning, this is one of those things that for her is nurtured joy. And she is really clear that for her, this process is a life-changing thing because she was running down a road that was not joyful for her in the moment. There were plenty of things, I mean, she clearly will say her life didn't suck, right? I mean, she was living a good life, but she was lacking something. And it was this process, it was one of the things that allowed her to find it. So, I think that's an important question. What is it within us that generates and creates joy? And then how do we cultivate that so that we're our best selves in our day-to-day stuff, right? The follow-up question to that is, what do those in our lives need to rise up to be their best?
We need to knead them.
We need our hands on them and bruising them up and just folding them into how they are supposed to be and the boxes they are supposed to fit into. Right.
Or just shove them in the oven for a while at 200.
Exactly.
Taking 350.
It's a really good follow-up question, though, right? If our basic call, going back to the call of Abraham, is to be a blessing to the nations, is to be a blessing to others, then one of our questions hopefully needs to be, what are we doing to cultivate joy or yeast? What are we doing to help others, to empower others, which is a better word than help, rise up to be their best? I mean, a very missional question and a really good follow-up question. Think through that question because it's a very important one. She talks, continuing on that page, about how her friend was doing the double rise. Anyone do a double rise? Rebecca? Okay. Talk about that process.
Well, that's always, I've always done bread that way. So you make your loaf, you put it in the pan, it rises again, and then you bake it, and it rises some more while it bakes. With the braided challah, there's sort of a little like, oh well, I'll just let go, because you make a pretty braid, and then as it rises again, I don't know how it's going to look ultimately, but that's, even when you put it in the oven, you're not quite sure if it's going to rise all evenly while it bakes. But anyway, it's nice to let it rise up some more.
So I had a similar process. I did the double rise like once or twice. And the first time I didn't braid it, the second time I did. And again, I've told you this before, not an expert in braiding. And so I had the braids looking exactly the way I wanted them to. Stuck it in to rise again, and it just looked like a mess. And so I'm looking at it going, what the hell is this? This is not what I envisioned in my mind. This is not what I wanted. And so I haven't done a double rise since. Because the aesthetics kind of ruined the process for me.
Wouldn't the bread be lighter?
Yeah, so I don't know because I don't do it, right? Now, I have friends who do it, who swear by it, say it's the greatest thing. I just haven't done it since then.
Well, my bread was a little bit lighter when I let it rise a little bit before I actually baked it. But I did a combo between my Jewish holiday cookbook and her recipe. And so I graduated the temperature up. every 15 or 20 minutes, and it came out really nice.
Yeah, so again, how do we acquire knowledge? How do we gain experience? When I was doing it the first couple times and could not follow the mommy and me recipe, I was in a Jewish fraternity. So I started calling my fraternity brothers to get in touch with their mothers and say, okay, what is your recipe and how is it that you do it? One of the people that we call family by choice, they live in a Jewish area in Chicago. And so I called them and I said, all right, I need to know how your neighbors are making challah and I need their recipe. And so for a while I was trying different ones, and I realized it was not the mommy and me recipe, I'm the one that was broken. And once I figured it out, it was different, and I use hers now. But it's interesting because part of the fun is experimenting, at least part of the fun for me. But she says very clearly she doesn't experiment at all. She just follows the recipe. But part of the fun for me is experimenting. And so sometimes it's trying different recipes, sometimes it's adding things. Sometimes it's whatever. So let's talk about the prayers. Are y'all separating the piece as and then praying over it? I do not. So.
But it feels really weird. It's like you take a piece off, you pray over it, you're feeling kind of good, and you throw it in the garbage. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I did it the first time, and I didn't do it the second time.
So was it interesting to learn that challah, as we traditionally understand challah, is not challah? Challah is not challah. Did anybody catch that? Yeah. Challah is not the bread that we're making, it's just that little piece that you tear out, right? So it's interesting, right? Because all the time I've been hearing about challah, and all the time I just assumed it was the loaf of bread. I didn't know it was the piece that you tore out and the ritual process of it. I just think that's cool. I tend not to tear out. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It was funny though, when my mom and I were making this past week, she's like, are we going to tear the bread? And I was like, you're reading along. That's how you know we're supposed to do that. Because before, you've never cared. So it was interesting. She talks on page 131, and I think this is a really cool thing. Since I don't use 5 pounds of flour, my dough doesn't always technically merit me saying the prayer, but I say it anyway. And so it's a prayer that you are supposed to pray as you're making the bread. But only if you're using a certain amount. That's in the actual law, right? And so the question is, as people of faith, how do we balance law and free will? How do we hold those two in relationship with each other?
You're talking about God's law and free will?
Yes. How do we balance the two, law and will?
I don't think we ever have trouble letting free will rise up and guide us, because it's just in us and it's constantly speaking to us, and we do this. But having God's law, that's comforting. You know, that's a...
Whoa, say more about that, because most Christians, if you talk about the law, do not say comforting. Say more about that. You can't just leave that statement.
That there is our God, the ruler of the universe, who actually cared so much about us that he gave us guidance, he gave us commandments, he gave us laws, he loves us, and we're in Easter week. He gives us forgiveness. So we who are believers, we're never going to have our free will snuffed out. It just doesn't go away. But having the law of God is she calls it an anchor. I don't know what exactly I call it, but it sure is there. It's there, and it's like on my, it's just the
Yeah, so the way you're describing law is a very Old Testament, like sure enough, Old Testament description of law, as it's an anchor, it's a guidance, it's a communal way of living. It is not a very Christian way, and again, we are more spiritual, I get it, but it's not a very Christian way of talking about law. When you get Christians together and they talk about law, they talk about it in ways that are restrictive, and it's, oh, we don't like that God and that version of God. But when the law was given, its intent was to guide our brothers and sisters and therefore guide us into what it is to be the community. And so in that regard, it's very freeing. It's, here is your identity. Here's how people are going to know who you are. Here's how people are going to know what you do. And so the song we sing, they'll know we are Christians by our love. I mean, part of the whole purpose of the law is people are going to know that you are mine because of the way you live. And it's simple. If you follow these things, you are going to impact the world in just insane ways, and people are going to want what you've got. That is, you put a bunch of Christians together, that is not how they talk about the law most of the time. They talk about it as just this painful thing that is just beating us down. And the crazy part is that was never the intent. The intent was just to take away any anxiety and to say, here's what it means to be my people, and here's how it is that you walk with me, right? And so in that regard, I mean, it's a gift. No different than how we gift those under our care that we love. Here's what it means to be in a relationship with me, right? You cannot talk to me that way. You cannot, this is what it means to be, and because I love you, I'm going to tell you because I want to be in a relationship with you. That's the intent, and that's the way in which it was given. The crazy thing is, and again, I'm an Old Testament Christian, so I'm loving your answer. That's not how Christians typically think about the law, which is sad, because that's what's passed down, and that's the narrative, that it's restrictive. And what we have in Jesus is a new covenant and it's grace. That is true, but the old one ain't bad, at least as it was really intended.
So how do you go, when Jesus says, or when it says, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law, take that Old Testament perspective with that statement?
Yeah, so Jesus saying, and he's talking to the religious leaders and he's talking to his people, right? Because part of what's going on is they are in conflict because he is living differently than the religious leaders of the time, who were supposed to be the ones modeling what it was to be the community. And he's putting forth a different model. And what he's saying to them is, look, this tension that we have, this is not how it's supposed to be. We are partners in this, and I'm not here to tear apart this stuff that is so foundational to you. And part of what he's saying is, I'm a Jew too, because he was Jewish, right? The church didn't start till after him. And so part of what he's saying is, because we are human, we have kind of warped what this looks like, and I'm trying to show you what the intent was. So I'm not tearing apart who you are. I'm not tearing apart your identity. I'm just trying to bring it back. So I've come to fulfill it. If you are living the way you think you are living, you're going to look more like me, is what he's saying, right? And what he's doing, and they have so much invested in their stuff, and we get this. We have brokenness in us because of our investments in our stuff too, right? But what he's doing is inviting them back to a sense of who they really are. And to use my prayer on Sunday morning, to whose they really are, right? Because the two are not in sync, which is why he's saying that. You're clear that you are this. And he's not saying you're not. He's saying, but if you're this, it needs to look more like this. Right? So for him, it's, I don't want to fight with you. I want to invite you to do something cool with me. So, yeah, do we need to talk more about that? No? Okay. because I think it's a really cool, it's a really cool story and a really cool time of Jesus extending grace. But as we know, we're not always open to grace. I'm not always open to grace, perhaps y'all are.
But that's the bridge to what Rebecca said and you reinforced. Is
Yeah.
That's the way the law is looked at in the Old Testament. And he says, and I'm not here to abolish it, but to fulfill it. This is what the Old Testament is really saying, not what you've turned it into.
Right. And so, and you can kind of see that, right? And you can see it throughout history. So you start with 10, and I think she gives us the number. It's like 613, right? Because, what's our question? Well, what does it really mean to kill? Or what does it really mean to honor my parents? Do I got to do everything they say, And so, so the father of the Presbyterian church is a guy named John Calvin. What he taught was this thing called predestination. It is purely a response to the Catholic Church, saying the way you are made right by God is by going to the priest and doing whatever the priest says. Well, there were plenty of good priests at that time, but there were plenty of broken ones too, who said, well, the way you're made right is you give me 5 cows and 6 whatever. Which really meant poor people could never be made right with God. So what John Calvin said is, no, God's totally in charge. There's nothing we can do. We cannot pay to make ourselves right with God. And for those for whom grace had been taken, those who couldn't afford it, this was an awesome thing, right? So what Calvin said is, stop worrying. Some are in, some are out. And that was awesome. And then people go, wait, which camp am I in? Am I in or am I out? What do you mean? If I say the prayer how many times? I'm still not in, perhaps, right? And so that created more anxiety. And so people finally had to say, all right, give us a number of who's in and who's out. 20% are in, 80% are out. What's the, and it was never his intent to do that. But eventually he's like, all right, 10% are in, 90% are out. But that was never his intent as he was teaching it. But the problem is again, we're human. We're trying to take this thing that is divine, and we're not divine, so we're gonna mess it up, right? So we started with 10, we went to 603. Well, it's hard to follow 603 laws. It's hard to follow 10, right? But you see what I'm saying? So, if we could get our humanity out of the way and just take these things as gifts of grace, we'd do a lot better, but it's hard to get our humanity out of the way. So, they talk about, and she talks about prayer when we're taking the bit out, and she makes this comment. Of course, in my tradition, we have a prayer for everything, right? But think about what that means. What that means is everything can be sacramental. Everything can be sacramental. Something as mundane as ripping out a little bit of bread can be sacramental. Something as mundane as tying your shoe can be sacramental. If we stop and center ourselves, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Think about it. We're so busy, we're so running. I don't think about what I'm putting on ever. What would it be to go, all right, I'm just grabbing this shirt because it's the closest one to my arm? What would it be to stop and be grateful that I have shirts to choose from and pray for that? Or, What would it be to be present in the moment and say, what statement am I making by dressing the way I'm dressing? How does this experience give glory to God? There's something beautiful. In my tradition, of course, we have a prayer for everything. She's kind of laughing at herself in her tradition, but at the same time, there's something really beautiful about that. And it'd be really cool if we could claim it. Like anything else, can you need too much? You can go too far, and you can't do anything because then you got to pray before you do something, right? But I think we're far from that. So it'd be cool to think about that. There was one thing I wanted to make sure we were talking about. Okay, shaping the dough. I'm on page 137. Going back to our words earlier, we had destructive. What other word did we have? Invasive? I know we had destructive, right? The recipe says this: punch out the dough one more time. I read it. I can't tell me how many times I read it. Today, it felt violent. Punch out the dough. Perhaps because of the Oscars and Will Smith punching Chris Rock, right? Punch out the dough. All I can think about is when she and I talk, I want that part to be rewritten. I know what she means, but as I read it, not in context, I want it to be different words.
That was the fun part. Everybody always wanted to be able to one to go and let it all go.
So perhaps, but if you use different words, if you didn't say punch out, what words would you use?
Press.
Okay, press, what?
Collapse.
Collapse out the dough? Collapse the dough? Okay.
Deflating it.
It always says, usually it says punch down.
Yeah, punch down is really, that's standard bread making language.
Okay, so it could say punch down. What else? How else would you phrase it? Push. Okay. Push out the dough. How else would you phrase it?
Poke.
Poke the dough. Okay.
As if we're getting less violent.
So, but smush. Okay. But what I want you to see is off the top of our heads, we just rewrote the recipe. Right? Off the top of our heads, it did not even enter your minds to do so when you read it, when you came in today. Off the top of our heads, we rewrote the recipe. Think about what else we could rewrite.
I have a picture in my head of what I'm doing, and so how I word it is, poking, that's like, well, yeah, I guess I'm kind of poking it with my fist, but, I know what I'm doing, and so it's not rewritten exactly in my head.
Okay. But again, think about the exercise we just did. It took no effort. What else could be rewritten? Think about the stories that we tell ourselves that may not be our best stories. Perhaps we could reframe them such that they are still true, but not self-destructive. Think about the stories we tell about others, the neighbor from hell, the person cutting us off in traffic. Without even any effort, we can rewrite those stories too. Think about the stuff that we can do. Think about the people we know. When I would do youth ministry, one of the most painful things, and it was mostly girls, was watching a girl get told a story by the group and then watching her live into that story. I had a girl who was just wicked smart, and she was told that she was dumb by the group, and she wanted to be cool, And over the course of a school year, she went from being straight A's to almost failing. Because the story she was being told over and over and over. Luckily, her parents got her into a different school, different friends, and she could rewrite her story. She was lucky. I mean, there's plenty of people. I mean, so part of our responsibility to each other, because we're part of a community. I mean, we're connected to each other, is when we see people writing bad narratives, to help them reframe them, to help them rewrite them, right? Because again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the stories we tell are important. And the stories we tell about ourselves are really, really important. That's not to say we need to tell blowing up stories that we're the greatest in the world, because that's not necessarily helpful either. But part of our responsibility to each other is to help each other rewrite bad narratives, right? I think it's, and we saw it was just a recipe. It's no different. It just takes a little bit of doing. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. I love the way our reading ends this week. She makes bread just for the beauty of it. It is an art form. As you are doing this, are you getting a sense that you're creating something? Yeah, say more about that. What is it that says, okay, I am creating something? Is it the finished product? Is it the whole thing?
It's the smell. As soon as the yeast starts pervading the house, anybody that is in the house or that walks into the house is aware that something new is being created and something wonderful. So, and there's a happy mood to it.
Yeah. So what's the first story we're told about God? Yeah, if I asked it at a Baptist church, they would answer it much quicker. I get it. Yeah, the very first story is creation, right? I mean, so each time we create, we are doing something divine. We are not divine, but we're doing something the divine did, right? There is something just awesome each time we create. And most of the time we miss this. And so our ancient brothers and sisters the first thing they wanted us to know about God is that God creates. So if we are created in that image, when we create things, we are doing something that is divine. And there is something just amazing about that. That may not be the first thing we want people to know about God, but that's what our ancient brothers and sisters, the very first thing they wanted the world to know about God was that God creates. There's just something really cool about that. And I think as people of faith, we need to open our eyes to that. Each time we are creating something, we are living into that model. And so the danger is, well, we didn't create the world, it's not nearly as cool. Garbage. What we are creating, I mean, just the process. And whatever awakens us to the process, be it the smells or the excitement or another, or just the satisfaction of having done it, know that we have done something divine. And there's something really beautiful in that. So, what else for the good of the cause? I've kept you late. Nothing else?
Mark knows it. He says, let's pray.
He knows I've kept him late. He's like, look, dude, I'm only good for an hour. I'm only supposed to be in here for an hour. It's not how this works. So again, I want to remind you that the Wednesday of Holy Week, we're adding that extra session, 6 o'clock virtual bake. A really cool process. Going back to Becky's question, bake experience the whole thing if you want, or just sit and watch and experience it that way. Both are really, really cool.
Is it like, just go on Riverside Press?
We'll send out a Zoom link and we'll do it. Yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll have to, because we'll send out a Zoom link. Yep. So, all right, let's pray. Great and loving God, again for this day and for this time, this chance to be together as your people, the chance to think about what it is to live as your children, the chance to think about what it is that all of your children experience food, experience wholeness, experience the good gifts of you. We give you thanks and praise for this particular group and our willingness to be vulnerable, our willingness to be honest, our willingness to be open to you and to the Spirit and the ways in which you're moving. We give you thanks and praise. And we just ask, Lord, that you would continue to open us up to good voices that are of you, so that who we are and what we do is more in line with who you'd have us be. We thank you as your people for your Son, especially as we are getting closer and closer to Easter, and the reminder that life is your word for all of creation. Let us live fully into it, and let us help others rise up and do the same. In your name we pray. Amen. Y'all, thank you much. And again, if you're baking, send me pictures.